Forward. All right, well, hello everyone. Welcome to day 2. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I hope you enjoyed kind of yesterday and got excited and kind of got a feel for the rest of the week. To just do a quick little wrap up of what we covered yesterday at day 1. So we had Simon Beaumont join us and really talk about the importance of data literacy, chart types and some resources, data behaviors, building the concept of questions and just critical thinking, and really just understanding that the whole concept of data literacy is just being centered around people. And then on top of that, we ended it with a very inspirational story from a student in our community named Esther. And so I think she really got everyone excited for the week ahead. And if you missed it, I did share the on-demand recording to everyone yesterday. So if you did not get that email from me, please let me know, and I'm happy to share it back out with you. As mentioned, all of these sessions will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. Currently, our YouTube admin is on vacation, so unfortunately, I can't get all of these videos up until Wednesday, but I have still been emailing all the hard files and the MP4, so you're still able to watch the on-demand recording. If you have any questions for Carl today, please post them in the Q&A chat box and we'll be sure to answer them. And then again, for those who attend all 5 of these sessions, a little incentive is you will get some free Tableau merch, because who doesn't love some free stuff? So just a quick overview of the rest of the week. So we knocked out day 1. Today, we're going to jump into Tableau Prep and kind of really learn the front end before we kind of jump into Tableau Desktop. So how to really make sure your data is set up and prepared before you go in and create your visualizations and dashboards. Wednesday, we'll have an escape room demo. So really kind of showing fun ways to use Tableau and kind of learn the interface and things like that. And then followed by another student story from a previous student ambassador. And then Thursday is going to be really that like the meat of this week of a really hour-and-a-half hands-on training. So that's where you're really going to need your Tableau Desktop license. So if you haven't gotten that yet, please feel free to get your free license at Tableau for Students on our website. And then we'll end the week by connecting with one of our Tableau Public ambassadors and discussing kind of building your digital personal brand on Tableau Public. So I am super excited to welcome back Carl for joining us at summer camp. This is the second time we've done this, and this is the second time I'm having him here. So after 1 day of Tableau training from the information lab several years ago, Carl became a Tableau addict and decided to make it his full-time job. So Carl joined the information lab back in September in 2014. So his experience focused on operational improvement, customer experience measurement, and propositional development. And in his own time, he runs the blog Data Jedi Ninja that focuses on Tableau tips, tricks, visualizations, and experimentation. And it really allows him to visualize sports data, especially basketball, and have a global discussion about what he finds along the way. Carl is a Tableau Desktop certified trainer, Tableau Server qualified associate, and an Ultrix certified trainer. So he is stacked up on certifications. So really just excited to kind of kick off today and get you guys introduced to Tableau Prep. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and Carl, I will pass it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. I always don't know where to start after that intro because it feels like a wholly different life ago when I was doing everything within that. So I'm actually going to twist this around a little bit compared to how I did with last time. So Doug and I took some of the feedback that we had last time round, and just to kind of talk about how this all fits together, because as you mentioned, lots around certifications and kind of lots of things that didn't involve the word data in that starting point. And I think that's probably one of the big differences with me and my career. So today, before we dive into Tableau Prep, we'll actually just talk about my career path a little bit, because certainly as a student coming out of university, I was not expecting this path to be the one. I think I've done all right from it, but it certainly wasn't there. So some hints and tips from me on that before we dive into all things Tableau Prep, and hopefully that'll also help position why I really enjoy Tableau Prep, why I like using it, why we have so much fun with it as we kind of go through and do what we do with the tool, because it's really opened the door to so many other people. Just like Simon yesterday, hopefully he offered, as we have a strong British accent, then feel free to stop us and ask questions if we're getting a little bit too far ahead of ourselves. So just let me know whenever you want. I've got questions, I've got the Q&A up, I've got the chat up, so whichever angle you want to take, just please let me know. No such thing as a stupid question in anything that I do, because I've asked lots of them, basically. Originally, I was a history and politics student, so I didn't kind of fall into the computer science or what would now probably be more data science camp. At university, I was very much in the arts and social sciences, so a very different education, but mostly just to kind of keep my options open. And where that led was actually to an insurer's graduate scheme. Again, not even a natural kind of link in there that you kind of think history and politics and go to insurance, right? That doesn't really link up. So a little bit of a different way to get there. So even going into an insurer's graduate scheme that was focused on business management and primarily customer experience, how does data fit into that? And then I was just really intrigued by Bergen's slide at the start there about Simon's point around we've got to remember that data is human-centric. And actually, that's how I fell into this. When I started on that insurance graduate scheme, I started with the team that organized the graduate scheme. I came back from Australia after living and working out there for a bit. And I kind of ended up in this world by handling lots of information for other people. So it was for the executive team. We were taking slides and charts and commentary and pulling it together to kind of share the insights of what was going on within the business, good and bad, so they could then go and make some more informed decisions and work their way through everything that they had to do as leaders of the business. And personally, I hated it. I hated asking people for, can I have this chart? Can I have this graph? Can I have this commentary? Because my whole degree and training up to that point was don't believe anything, question everything from loads of different angles. And there I've got somebody who's telling me this really important thing that, no, they're fine. I know it doesn't look good, but it's all okay. Don't worry about it. So I didn't have that ability to, one, because I was quite young, with not a huge amount of business experience, to really go and question why it was going on. So when I was actually asked, where do I want to start? I actually kind of pointed to literally the old white guys in the corner. That was the data teams at the time. They weren't talked to by anybody else, even though they were very close to us. You didn't really hang out with the data guys at all. Because I wanted to learn how to go and get this stuff myself. What happened was the data team, a centralized team, would produce all the charts and graphs. They would go and share those charts and graphs with the business. It's probably the same reports that have been done hundreds of thousands of times before. And then those business leaders would choose what they wanted to share with the executive team, good and bad. Not very much bad, strangely. You'd find that hard to believe. And then that's the kind of commentary and things that we would then share, and we'd go up to board meetings and kind of that's where you kind of get the critique of the business. It's not surprising that for anybody who's looked at Net Promoter Score, which goes from negative 100 through to positive 100, Apple, I think, used to be about 87. Positively, Aviva was negative 33 when we were doing it. It's not surprising as a business we weren't doing well when we couldn't really critique how we were doing things in the way that we'd want to. So that's where data came into it for me. It finally allowed me to go and take people's real experiences and start to show what people were actually going through, rather than this kind of massage message that kind of people had put together and made it so they probably wouldn't get fired, let's be honest. I loved poking people with big sticks going, that wasn't good, was it? Because actually what the data showed is this. Oh, you've got the wrong data. No, I haven't. Go and find me data that contradicts this. So I wasn't loved, I think it was fair to say, but I was seen as doing that pretty successfully. And at Aviva, my team was, let's say, old school. They really were the old guys in the corner. These folks that actually used to start their work with Aviva, lots of them came through what's called the typing pool. And that was where, with physical typewriters, they would write the insurance contracts. And if they got a page wrong, they'd have to scrap it and rewrite it. And that was basically a form of data entry in a way. So as computing started to come through and things like Excel, these were the guys who picked up and ran with it. Most of my team, because I ended up running that team, they'd worked for Aviva longer than I'd been alive. So that's a whole different challenge on leadership as well when you find yourself in those positions. But the team was kind of using data dumps from a separate sister team out of SQL databases. We weren't allowed to touch the SQL database. We'd get an Excel file. The team would build charts in that Excel file, and then we'd push them into PowerPoint slides, add some commentary, and kind of send it off around the business and start that process that I spoke about earlier. Huge amounts of waste, loads of chance for mistakes, not really responsive data work. So we were really lagging what people needed to know and understand. And that led to quite a lot of frustration about the use of data. Data was seen as a dirty word, waste, cost. It wasn't really seen as facing something or seeing as something quite useful. And then I stumbled across this thing called Tableau. You might have heard of it, hence why you're here. Hopefully you have. And even back then, so that was about 2011, so version 7 of Tableau, the version numbers are completely different now, but over 10 years ago now, we had this kind of slightly different, sorry, someone's using a really loud appliance outside. Somebody used, we were using kind of just really archaic tools, and then Tableau came in and it was still very similar to what you have with Tableau Desktop today, but my team didn't need to be able to code SQL. They could really just go and start building what they needed to through drag and drop, as you saw hopefully with Simon yesterday, and start to see later on this week as well, just how easy it is to build things in Tableau. And that kind of piqued my attention, because we could actually go and make things a lot faster, get rid of a whole load of the manual workarounds, and actually get really the insight and help empower people to get their own analysis rather than this kind of central little team doing everything. We could become the gurus to go and help and empower others. That was the dream, because I found this thing called Tableau. Apart from Aviva didn't let me have it. So I tried, I thought, I went to the board in London, still didn't work, even though I got everybody up out their seats. And they went to look at this board with a tree map, and we're chatting all of that through. They didn't back me with funding, which was super frustrating. So I left. I went to Barclays. I had enough. Went and joined a bank instead of an insurer. And eventually I kind of stumbled over somebody who had got Tableau into the business, was doing some great stuff with it. He went on to become a director at Spotify, and he now is a very senior director at Google. Again, pretty successful guy. So there's a team of me, Pete, who I just mentioned, and a guy called Lee, who started basically data analytics at Man City Football Club. So we're quite varied in our skill set. But it was kind of the three of us really leading the way with data and Tableau at Barclays. And this is really where that kind of squiggle on the side of the slide actually really describes my job and my world, because I never would have imagined doing this thing and kind of working in that way. And that's where I stumbled across my current insurer, the Information Lab. They were the guys that gave me that 1 day's training. I've now been with them 8 years. We run a thing called the Data School to go and teach people who don't have much of a data background, and some people who do, but go and get them ready to have great careers. And Priya, who you're going to see on Friday afternoon, or Friday morning your time, she is actually one of the people who went through the data school. So you'll kind of see how successful people can be as they go through this. So I'm the head coach in the UK. We now have a data school in New York, as well as London, in Melbourne and Sydney, and we've got one in Hamburg in Germany as well. So slowly we're taking over the world. As Brits do. We smile, we're nice, but actually we're just imperialists at the end of the world. We're just trying to take over everything. But really that's kind of where I've got to now. And the whole reason why I teach is because I love empowering people to kind of go and take data where they don't quite feel comfortable with it originally and go and become really, really good at it. It doesn't take that much. And really Tableau for me is still that tool set that allows anybody to do this. I talk about lowering barriers to entry, because actually I've had to go and take myself away for SQL courses and whole loads of stuff as I go through my career to be able to do some of the things that I've been able to do, which is lovely. But not everyone's going to have that opportunity. So I want to remove those barriers. That's ended up with me writing books. So Communicating with Data, my latest book. upside down, Tableau Prep up and running, a book about Tableau Prep. None of this stuff I'd ever dream of doing, but Tableau has completely made that possible, which is kind of an amazing thing to go through, just because I found this one tool and started using it quite a lot. But today we're going to talk about all things Tableau Prep. And Tableau Prep is different from the visualization piece that you see, and let's not lie about it, it doesn't look as fun when you first touch it. You're not creating the beautiful visuals, you're not diving into the data in the same easy way to kind of do what we've done elsewhere. But I'll say one thing about Tableau Prep. Tableau Prep's the one tool that could earn you a lot of money in your career. And as your students, some people are driven by money or empowerment on helping others, Prep is the tool that opens the door to do stuff that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. That's pretty damn cool. I really like that. And it's really changed how people are able to work with data. So let's take a little step back before we dive in too far. What is it that Prep does? It takes messy or multiple data sources and pulls everything together to the one source or sources of data that we can plug into Tableau Desktop to do that analysis, to create those beautiful visuals, to get that deep insight. But it does it in a way that we build it once and then it just becomes repeatable. We've only had this tool for just over 4 years now. I still remember celebrating the day it was finally released. It felt like it was coming for a long time. But it was finally this chance to go and allow people to do lots of the stuff that I'd spent years learning how to do in just a few clicks. Like that's why I like progress. I don't want everybody to go through the same struggles that I've had to. But it really has changed who can actually work with data and what data they can work with. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm analyzing a piece of data, I just want to ask another question. I find something out. I want to ask another question. I find something out. I want to ask another question. Oh, actually, I need a different data set. But if I add that in, I can ask even more questions. That's what being good with data really looks like, whether that's your own questions you're answering or whether you're answering questions for other people. I'm sure lots of that was, again, what Simon would have taken you through yesterday. But Tableau's built this thing in a way that allows us to do that really easily, with its really like laser focus on users. So it's not hidden behind loads of technical code to be able to go and do this. It's not hidden in lists and lists and lists of huge amounts of options that eventually you might stumble across if you're lucky. Tableau is using both data visualization, and we've kind of got a little snippet down the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, where you're seeing the data as you're actually cleaning up and working with it. So you can see some of those issues. Like there's lots of bad spellings of Edinburgh in the city column on that left-hand side. I know that's an issue if I think there should just be one spelling of Edinburgh. You can use your knowledge of the data or the subject matter, and you can very rapidly work with that. If that's hidden in a list of thousands or millions of rows, you're not easily going to go and see those things. That becomes difficult to work with. Or if you present that data to somebody else, you kind of kneecap yourself really and kind of like get rid of your own arguments if you're not careful. So you look a bit foolish. And if people are making big decisions around hiring or firing or buying a company, selling a company, they need to have absolute faith in what you're showing them. Just because you create a great visual, they're going to go and question it deeply. You've got to trust the data. Tableau Prep is helping us go and trust that data before we go and take it too far and start working with it. So Prep is actually now 2 tools. There's Tableau Prep Builder, the bit we're going to use today, which kind of like Tableau Desktop sits on your laptop. There is a web-based version of it now as well, but it's where you're going to go and build those flows. So take a data set or multiple data sets and go and clean it up and get it ready for analysis. On the flip side, you've got Tableau Prep Conductor. The term conductor is kind of as a musical conductor, because once we build flows, we want them to go and work. We don't have to want to go and hire somebody to sit there and just press play and run those flows continually. We want them to go and be able to go and grab hold of the data when it's ready, on time, in the middle of the night, whenever it may be. So we're going to park Tableau Prep Conductor for today and focus on Tableau Prep Builder. But even though the tool completely lowers the barrier to entry, there's a little bit of a challenge here. I threw out a weekly challenge. Tableau's got loads of them. Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, Sports Fit Sunday that Simon leads, a whole load of different challenges that go on. When Tableau Prep arrived, I'm like, great, we can create one around prep and data. Why not? Let's do it. push the challenge out on a Wednesday, post the solution on the following Tuesday. Great, nice and easy. Everyone's going to dive in. Not, the challenges aren't too hard. There's some weeks that are easier than others. Everyone's going to be able to do this. No. This is when I discovered that even though I was really conscious about what skills I did have and I didn't have as I'd gone through my career, I kind of forgot lots of the things that I now just take for granted for working with data. And we found that early on with the challenges, people really struggled to take part in them because they didn't have some fundamental skills. So we created this thing called Prep and Data to not just produce those skills, but also to go and share some of that knowledge. And actually lots of that's what became my first book, Prep Up and Running. Now, you don't have to buy the book. You can do. It's refined, it's edited, it's a lot easier to consume. But on the prepanddata.blogspot.com site, which I put in the chat earlier, you will find a link to, in the middle of the page at the top, the How to Prep Index. This is a list of pretty much most of the chapters that went into the book on how you go about learning some of these skills that you need to do to prepare data. Because it's not the same as just dragging and dropping data to actually go and analyze it. You need to know what shape of data that you're trying to go and construct, how to actually go about planning what you're about to do, as well as all of those things around the different connections, how to profile data, the different data types, different things technically. All of those are in easy to consume little blog posts that are free and easy to use off the site. So feel free to use those as much as you want. If you've got questions, then I think my details are on email and Twitter are around. Feel free to ping me questions as and when you need to, or connect on LinkedIn. Don't mind, however that works. So we actually found that we had to put together these how-to posts to allow people to be able to go and take on the challenges. So all the challenges are listed on the prepanddata.blogspot.com site. I'll talk about the other link I sent earlier as well. When we say who set the challenge, what skills you might have or to need, and some links to those if they're slightly different challenges in the week. And then we go and set up the challenge. So we give you the input data files. We give you the requirements. This is from one of our easier weeks. So this is where we kind of spell out those requirements really clearly. But think of them as your boss looking over your shoulder and she's asking you questions around, oh, can you do this or can you do that? That's really kind of what we're looking for within those requirements. And then showing the output of where we want to get to with the actual data fields, so those columns, and how many rows of data you should be left with, and the full data sets there to be able to go and share if you want to. So that's how these kind of challenges work. And we found that actually some people needed some of those skills first. If you've worked with data before, or if you've been lucky enough to do one of those data science or computer science courses, you might know kind of enough to be able to go and handle what you need to do for the challenges. But if not, that extra support is there. But the Prep and Data challenges still live on today. We publish another one tomorrow. That's in the can, ready to go. A couple of weeks ahead for once, makes a nice change. But what we're doing with these challenges is really helping people to go and get the chance to learn this. Because you'll have heard the term Tableau Public. It's Tableau Desktop, but it's what allowed me to go and start working with data and playing with data, ultimately, as Bergen mentioned, NBA data, basketball data, to go and start exploring the game in different ways. And that's a free tool to do that. Prep doesn't have a free tool, but also companies are really kind of cautious when you're using their data and you're changing their data. So that's why we kind of create Prep and Data as this play space. And all of the examples we go through today is actually kind of all from the site. So actually, if I just jump back to the site for a second, you'll find at the top of the page, the challenge index, that's got all the challenges within it, the challenge and the solution. We're going to be doing the kind of first example I'm going to show is week 2 of 2019. Really basic data set, so it's super quick to understand, and I'll just kind of go through that. A great one to go and practice then on is challenge number 6, so week 6 of 2019. But there are so many to now choose from. So go and have a play, or again, ping me a message and I can recommend a few different ones. The actual first 4 challenges of week 20 of 2021 and of 2022 were designed essentially as beginner courses to go and talk you through those skills. So feel free to use those as well if not. But yeah, we're going to stick with the 2019 stuff. I'm a traditionalist history student, surprise. Cool. So Prep and Data science, super useful. But back to the actual tool that this is about. You can do Prep and Data with any tools. You don't have to use Tableau Prep, but we've designed it to really work and be optimized with Tableau Prep. And what we're going to see is kind of like this thing that you're seeing on the screen right now. So it's where we're actually going and inputting data and then choosing to go through these different transformational steps to go and tidy up our data set and make it clean and easy. That all happens within the prep tool. So that's what I'm going to dive into now. So just before I kind of kick on any further, I'm just going to kind of just pause for questions and see if anyone's got any questions around any of the career stuff. Probably don't need to know too much more, apart from nobody has this kind of straight trajectory career to be a visionary or ambassador or anything else in Tableau. You meander your way through that, find your own path. It's way more fun. But also, if you have got any questions around prep or just kind of getting started, then feel free to drop those in the chat now and we will answer those.
Hey, Carl, do you mind talking a little bit about the requirements of the data school? I was just talking to one of your colleagues yesterday, just learning about like the requirements and application process. And I just think it's a really cool opportunity for students if it's something they want to get involved in.
Sure. So the data school, either .co.uk for the UK or .com or .com.au for the Australian, is primarily designed for everybody. We've had everybody from fully trained doctors and dentists to chemistry, biology, PhD students who have just got fed up with lab work, through to bartenders and librarians. Like, we've literally taken everybody because we don't care about your CV. I'm sorry if you've put yourself through university, college, school, wherever, you wrapped up a nice student debt. Yep, I remember those days. But ultimately, what we do is we actually look at what you go and create in Tableau Public. So the one thing that we ask you to do is build something in Tableau Public. So just get started with the tool, build a piece of analysis on anything that you want. So we get applications on the colors of Crayola crayons, through to the Pokedex and Pokemon, through to Premier League fantasy football and NFL fantasy football or baseball, through to malaria and women's rights and educational challenges around the world. Absolutely everything. We generally, I'll put this politely, we don't care about the subject matter. We do care about those subject matters. Some of those are much more serious than others. And obviously we're focusing on Pokemon there when we talk about that. My colleague Jenny, who runs Prep and Data, you'll see lots of Pokemon challenges purely due to Jenny. We work with you on helping to refine that application to go and kind of kick your skills on. We always want it to be a learning experience. But ultimately, what the data school is if you get through that stage of building a piece of work that shows promise and kind of shows you've got some of the skills that we're looking for, that's really hard to articulate what those skills are. What we're really looking for is people who are just curious about the world and can kind of get stuck into the tool on their own to start with. But then what the data school is 4 months of training, paid right from day one, and pretty competitive rates as well that we're paying right from day one. We'll pay you through your training and then also through your 4 6-month placements. So the idea is that you would go and work with 4 of our big clients, everybody from the consultancy, so Boston Consulting Group, Deloitte, Accenture, through to big manufacturers or airlines, transport providers, banks, insurers, the list kind of goes onward. So it's a great way to go and not do what I did, which is work in one insurer, one big company, and then go across multiple departments within there, but actually work across 4 massive companies to begin with, and some smaller companies and charities as well. We sometimes get the chance to do placements there. And that's really kind of what the opportunity is. And at the end of the scheme, you might come and join the full company, the information lab, or really we've built the data school to go and kind of get you out into the world and go and work with our clients or apply anywhere else. You can go and do that. So it really is a kind of big door opener, hopefully, to kind of people who go through the scheme. All right. And we accept applications whenever. It might ask you which cohort, but if you're not sure when you want to start, just apply, and then we can go and fit you into cohorts that make sense for you. In the UK, we start a new cohort 2 out of every 3 months now, which is why, not just being stressed due to being a relatively new parent, but also having lots of data scholars to look after continually too. That is my work now. Anyway, let's run back to prep. All right, welcome to Tableau Prep. This might be the first time you're looking at it. So let me just show you around. The first thing to note is it probably looks and feels similar to Tableau Desktop or Tableau Public if you've opened that up. Your Discover pane over on the right-hand side. Hey, Gabriella, you've just asked a question around any files or links. There's a couple of links in the chat that we can repost for examples later, but I don't want you to do this as follow along. I'm going to be too quick, if I'm honest. So there's some links to the challenges, and I'll drop in the specific challenges as well as we've done that. Cool. Thank you, Bergen. God, I wish I had you as a teaching assistant every day. This is good. You'd be way too overqualified, but still. So we're just
happy to help.
Starting to have a look around Prep. So yeah, so Prep looks very much like the other Tableau tools. That's the benefit of being a Tableau and being a consistent suite, that once we kind of learn where some things are, we learn where the others. So some good links to training videos if you're just getting started with Prep, or even links to useful blog posts, etc. You shouldn't see the reads and flows in the same way that I do in the middle of my page, because that's my work. So if you've been doing those, I'd be a little bit worried, thinking that you're cloning my computer. The bit that I think you'll want to pay attention to is the bit that I've popped out on the side here. I'm not sure why the Prep devs did this, but they kind of hid it away to start with. Or you can hit on the blue Connect Data button. It does exactly the same. But it's where we're going to go and connect to data. That might be held on a Tableau server if you're using that in a bit more of a work example. If you're using it at home in your own time, you're probably looking at Excel or text files in CSV or files, those kind of things. Or if you're using something like SAS or SPSS or R, then you can go and pick up statistical files and work from there. Or one of the many big databases and repositories, data lakes in the world now. All of them have pretty good links into Tableau Prep where we can go and connect to that data and start running with it. So for today, I'm going to use an Excel file. Now, normally when I start to go and use Excel files, I will have the Excel file open and I'll show you what it contains. So you can actually go and work out what we need to do. I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to show you how I work with data nowadays and how more people work with data, because you're not going to get this always the ability to get this overview of what the data looks like before you get stuck into it. And actually one of Tableau Prep strengths is it's letting you do that a bit more. Despite its first screen, the input step is not much useful. We can see the different fields that we've got. So we've got this city field and a couple of examples. I'm sat in London right now, and I know that second spelling of London is not the one that we want. So I'm a little bit nervous. I'm thinking I've got some dirty data. Clearly I have, or we wouldn't be working with Tableau Prep to begin with. I've got some metrics. So the way that we're going to go and measure something, some measurements of those things. So is it with temperature, it's weather data. I'll give the game away on that. We've got some values, and then we've also got some dates as well. This challenge was originally posted in 2019, hence why those dates are a few years ago now. But from our input, when we've only got one sheet in Excel, that'll just be your input. If you get multiple, you'll see them listed down the side, and you just go and drag those in. We're going to go and kind of walk through the different sections of Prep that you'll see. So this top section, the kind of white background up at the top, that's what we call the flow pane. That's where we're going to go and kind of put together this logic that says, okay, here's where my data's starting. This is what I've got originally, but here's the changes that I want to make to it to make it easier to analyze. And that's ultimately what we're doing, whether that's pulling different data sources together or taking an example like this, messy data that we need to tidy up and make a little bit easier to use, because it saves us writing loads of calculations, or it helps a colleague that we can go and change this data once and then they don't have to use it time and time and time and time again. So how do we do that? Well, we kind of can't just use the flow pane. We're going to go and see our configuration panes, and they change for each of our different steps. I've used the term steps a couple of times now. Think of each of these kind of icons across the top as steps. If I click on the plus, you'll see all of the different step options I've got. So I've got this option to do a clean step. Think of that as a way to also look at the data, not just go and start to make those cleaning actions. But it's a way to go and get that overview of the data as to what you might want to solve. We have the ability to go and inject new rows of data into our original data set. So let's say I have one row of data per month, but I'm missing some months. I want to add some 0 or null rows into that, so I can record the fact that I'm missing data, or I don't have a record in the way that I'd expect to in that sense. Because if you're going to go and plot something, you've got to have the data to plot in the first place. So sometimes building out null or 0 rows is useful. we can actually change the aggregation of data. And this is one of the concepts that is very different from Tableau Desktop to Tableau Prep. That when we think about data, when we're preparing it, we think about what does each of those rows represent? It's what we class as the granularity. So what's the grain of the data? How detailed is it? So is it each row represents a month in a city? Is it that each row represents a second and a measurement on an electricity meter? What actually does the data represent? And understanding that's really important. But sometimes, especially in the age of the internet of things and microsecond measurements, you don't need all of that data in your analysis. Actually, it makes your analysis a lot harder. So aggregating that data to a bigger level, or sorry, a less granular level, so maybe taking it something from every second to every hour or every day, makes it so much easier to analyze. That's going to be super useful for you. So that's those aggregate steps. We can also not just change the granularity of the data, but also change the shape of the data. So that's what we class as pivoting. For any of Friends fans out there, I always imagine Ross carrying the sofa up the stairs with Rachel, pivot, pivot. We are trying to move the objects around, and that's where what we're doing with pivot steps, either changing columns into rows or rows into columns. And then what happens with multiple data sets? I can either go and join them together. So that's adding columns together from different data sources, or union data, stacking more data on top because the actual structure is the same. We've just got more rows from different sources. That's what we're doing with our union. For those of you who have the ability to code, if you can code in Python or R, you can use the scripting step. We won't be going through that today, or prediction within Einstein and using some of Salesforce's clever logic that's actually out there. Ultimately, the thing that you are pretty much always going to do with a Tableau Prep flow at the end of it is use an output step. And that's where you're going to go and publish the file somewhere to make it available. It might be for Tableau Desktop, or you might publish a CSV file to actually just go and push it into a different tool if you're not just using Tableau Desktop to do that work, or publish to databases as well. So there are key steps. Sounds pretty limited when we've only got kind of less than 10 of those things. But actually, kind of like you'll see within Tableau Desktop later this week, lots of the options that you need are available are only there when you need them. So rather than bombarding you on the screen and kind of showing you everything at once and kind of creating overloads, those options are only going to become available to us as we actually kind of start using those. So within Clean, I can start splitting rows, or I can actually go and start using calculations to pull them together. That's only there when I'm in a Clean step, because actually aggregation, that's two different things within there. So this is where Tableau Prep is really focused on using easy elements to actually dive into, to understand, to let people either do clicks or really simplistic calculations if they need to go and clean the data in the way that you want. Now, Ayush, sorry if I've kind of got your name incorrectly there. Can we manipulate data with Python to Panda in Tableau? Yes, that is through the scripting step. If I just add one of those quickly, you can see that I can go and connect to a Tab Py server. So you can use the Python's language within a Tab Py script to be able to go and do that. You save it as a file, connect it in, call that function, and then you can run from there. Again, I don't want to go too deep into that. That is really for those of you who you can use that. What I often find with Tableau Prep is that you don't need to. And this is what I mean about keeping as much open to everybody as possible. That lots of my work, even when I was consulting and solving really hard things, like looking at, how do I put this without breaking lots of non-disclosure agreements, looking at dodgy trading behavior in investment markets, using Tableau Desktop to do it. All of the work that I conducted was relatively clever. Again, not a math student, but pretty good analysis that allowed people to go and find things that they hadn't found before in other ways. I needed to make sure that somebody could use that after me. I was very conscious of the skills of the people around me, that just because you can code in Python, for example, doesn't mean that the people that you're going to go and pass that work on to eventually can as well. So I always try and not dumb down, that's the wrong phrasing, but make it as kind of easy as possible to go and move on to other people, especially because I've been a consultant for years now. I'm not a full-time employee. I need to be able to go and pass that stuff on. So hopefully you'll see within Prep, there's a lot that you can do without some of those scripting languages, but there's also some cool stuff you can do with the scripting languages. So I won't say it's useless knowing them. It absolutely isn't, but there's limitations to what we have to do there. All right, you'll see that I've added a clean step. So I clicked on the plus, or you'll see that it's grayed out. So in the latest versions of Tableau Prep, you'll see that kind of icon is grayed out. If you click on it, it'll add a clean step. Clean steps are absolutely the place to go to get the overview of what's going on. When I worked at Barclays, so that job after Aviva, I had access to the retail database, so the retail bank, circa 15 million customers. We would have everything from every individual bank transaction that's gone through your account, through to what products you have, how much debt is on your mortgage or credit cards. Beautiful, amazing, wonderful data to go and find out about human behavior. That's all well and good. But I had 250,000 database tables to go and dig through. And out of those, about 3 of them were really well defined. So that's a lot of data that I didn't really know what it was and what it wasn't. So what I used to do was I used to go into Tableau Desktop, I'd connect Tableau Desktop to that SQL environment, and then I'd go and build histograms. I'd go and build histograms to understand what's actually within my data. The classic one I'd do is this date. I would go and grab the date column and look at how many rows I've got for each date. Tableau Prep does that automatically for me. This is one of the first reasons why I fell in love with the tool, because of probably how many hours, if not weeks, if not months, I've wasted in my life, because if I had Tableau Prep, I wouldn't have had to build all those bar charts. But to go and look at the distribution of data. So as I hover over in my date column, so this middle section is called our profile pane. It's giving us a profile of the data. As I hover over one of the bars, you'll see the 16th of Feb. Yes, I'm British. We have the dates around the other way, as does the rest of the world. Sorry, America, got it wrong. What we're doing is we're looking at how many rows of data we have about the 16th of February. We can see we've got 8 rows. And you see that all of these gray bars in the background are a consistent length. So each of those dates have 8 rows of data. So if that's what I'm expecting, that's amazing. That is absolutely spot on for what we want. What I used to find when I was going to connect to these big tables is suddenly I'd kind of have a dip in these bars, and I knew there was a system outage, or I wouldn't be able to average things in the way that I was expecting. That's great insight in its own right. It stops you making those silly mistakes. Here I've got something interesting. I have the word date in the date column. So what this actually tells me is if I go and click on date, I can go and see what that row is elsewhere in the data set. So if I go to my data pane, the bottom third of my screen, you can see that I've got the value of date, value, measure, exactly the same as my headers. I've got 2 tables here, just gone and being bolted together. Somebody hasn't taken out that extra set of headers or those column titles in the middle. That's annoying. What do I do? Well, everything in Tableau, you'll learn, is easy. Right click, and we can go and exclude that row. What that does is it doesn't delete it from that original input file. That just cleans it up from here on. We can actually go and see on the left-hand side of my profile pane, you'll see the word changes. It now has the number 1 next to it. And we can go and see that we've just excluded in that date field, the term date. So that's just gone and got rid of that row of data because it's just the headers. We don't need that. So that started to actually clean up my data without doing anything. What that also allows me to do is click on my data type at the top in the top left. You'll get used to these data types as you use Tableau Desktop more, and I can now change that to a date. I wouldn't have been able to do that before because I had a string, the alphabetic name within there. I'd have got a null. So actually that's starting to help me go and clean up that data in a nice way, making it more effective. Dates in Tableau Desktop are chef kisses, absolutely beautiful things, so easy to use compared to any other kind of coding that I've done before. So what else have we got going on within our data set? Well, the thing that kind of gives me nightmares is kind of what we've got over on this left-hand side. And we've got the correct spelling of Edinburgh, a lot of very dodgy spellings of Edinburgh, the correct spelling of London, the very dodgy spellings of London. We've only got weather data about London and Edinburgh. This challenge actually comes from, I was going to go and see my friend who'd just flown back from Antarctica. Very long story. But she was with her family in Edinburgh. So I was going to fly out for the weekend and go and see her and catch up with her because Antarctica is not quite so easy to catch up with someone. She's about to go off to the Himalayas, again, as you do. Normal friend conversations. How to use a sabbatical is all I'm going to say. So I've got to clean up this data if I can make some good analysis from it. And that's my challenge, that if I go and push this into Tableau, I'm going to have all of these different versions for Edinburgh, even though when we look at it as humans, we can kind of see this stuff looks and feels the same. That's the challenge of the kind of world of data and computer language versus humans, that we're going to look at stuff and apply logic, which computers haven't kind of caught up with yet. I say yes, because actually prep gives us some ways to go and simplify this. This little ellipsis menu, so these 3 dots that you'll find at the top of each of your columns, is where you're going to go and find loads of different options within Tableau Prep that's going to help you when you can't see something else that's easy to do. You could go and group these together, but let's imagine there's thousands of these records. They're a lot harder to go and tidy up. So if I hit on that ellipsis menu, I can see that I can either go and filter out the messy ones, but I might lose some useful data. I could go and clean them up if there's just a few kind of punctuation issues. But actually, group values is where we're going to go and use. And I could, again, do this manually, but that's not fun. We've got 3 clever algorithms that the prep dev team have introduced to us to help go and solve these situations, because this is, again, it's a very common thing that I've come across. So whether it's using pronunciation, so how you would actually say the word in English, although if you use prep in different languages, you'll get different results. As when I was training my French team, we couldn't work out why it was different, but the pronunciation is in your default setting of your language on your computer. Love learning this stuff in the middle of a training session. Common characters, so are the same letters used in the words, just in different places, or actually spelling, just like a human who makes a spelling mistake. If you've got an E instead of an I when you're expecting it, then actually most of the letters will be the same in the same location. It's just the odd letter won't be the same. So these algorithms basically will run through and help us group this data together automatically. And that way, if there's any further spelling mistakes down the way, that'll lob that in together as well. So let's first of all use pronunciation, see how well prep does. Not bad. I was trying to remember how many there were before. I think 17 or 12 different spellings. We're down to 4. We can see in the Edinburgh group that prep's gone, all of these things are similar. If I was to say this word and look at how the syllables are formed, they're similar enough. You can actually change the grouping and change the sensitivity of 2 of the algorithms to dial that up or dial that back for whether you want to be more or less sensitive with how that's working. London's done the same. But we've got a couple of issues. We've got this kind of password version of Edinburgh that the pronunciation of 3D !N is not the same as Edinburgh. That makes sense. And also London is not the same as O'Donnell, this kind of almost mixed up version of London. Now I'll tell you something about this challenge. I screwed up the spellings, but I did it to test prep. I generally didn't know how prep would respond. So when I first put in the pronunciation algorithm, I was like, that's not bad. It hasn't fixed it all. That's annoying, but not bad. So I clicked done. I was like, I wonder if we can use this multiple times. So I went down to group values again, went to common characters, and I clicked it. And O'Donnell has the same letters as London, just in a different order. So that is what prep is now grouped together. So not only can we use these clever algorithms, we can just layer the ones together that we need to go and tie this up. And then last but not least, we'll use spelling. And prep kind of knows, because I'm trying to group 3 things so into less things, it knows that it kind of needs to go and wrap in that Edinburgh. And you'll notice it's dropped its sensitivity. It's normally in that middle setting, just to allow that to happen. So there's really clever layers of logic here that means I don't have to think as much as that user. Yes, I want to think about what's happening so I know it's done it correctly, but we can go and check those as we go through. If we go back to that changes pane, we'll see the types of things that are going on. So we've got this audit trail as we go through. So it's not just me who then knows that this has happened. This has kind of become a working document that's alive and just lets everybody be able to go and use this too, which is nice. All right, so we are much cleaner on data. We've gone from our 12 or 17 different spellings. And I'll show you a quick core feature of prep. I can't remember how many there were. There were 12 originally. If you click on the different steps within your changes step, it acts as like a little time machine and goes and walks through them. You can also change the order that these things happen in by dragging them up and down on your changes pane. There are so many neat little things with this. I won't have a chance to go into all of them today, but we can have a lot of fun with this as we go through. But I also don't want to break what I've done, so I'll just go flip that back. Cool. Right, so I've sorted out my date. I've got my cities all nicely sorted. Now I need to change the shape of my data. Now I've worked with data for long enough that I know that in a Tableau world, and actually in most tools, I want to have one column per measure of what I'm actually doing. Currently, my metrics and measures are in rows. So if I'm comparing if I just go and highlight the 16th of February, and if I hold down control, let's just go and look at the Edinburgh ones for those, I can see that I've actually got 4 rows of data for that one date. That kind of makes calculations and those kind of things a lot harder. It's easier if the data's twisted around. So I want a column per metric. Now, to be able to do that, again, I'll shortcut this a little bit just due to time. We're going to have to do a calculated field that's nice and simple. And because we're adding 2 strings together, let's just go and make it a pretty string. So let's just go and add our metric and measure together. If you've used Tableau Desktop, all of these calculations and functions are exactly the same as what you have within desktop. And I'll call it metric. So we actually overwrite that. That's absolutely fine. Makes life nice and easy, and then we can go and get rid of our measure. The reason why I've done that is if I can't pivot 2 fields to the columns at the same time. That doesn't work. That doesn't make sense. So smushing those all together makes it a little bit easier to be able to go and do our pivot. So let's go and change the shape of this data. Now, I've intentionally left one thing out. I'll come back and show you what that is in a second. But if I select pivot, I can either go and say that I want to go and change columns into rows. Columns to rows is more common. It's kind of where you get somebody who forms an Excel sheet and adds a new column for each time that they go and update the sales in their store, for example. This time we want to go and take those 4 rows for Edinburgh and create 1 row of data, but about those 4 different metrics. So that's why we're changing to a rows to columns pivot. And also I love the fact that the devs have changed based on my feedback, made this stand out a little bit more because everybody kept missing this across all my classes and I kept feeding that back and they kept ignoring me. So I'm glad that's finally happened in this version. So metric will go at the top. So that means in this top section of the pivot step, and again, loads more detail in the how to prep index on the prep and data site about using pivots. For each of the values in this column, I'm now going to get a new column. And how do I want my values to go into those columns? Well, at the moment, you'll see that I've just got count, distinct, min, or max. That's a little bit weird because they're numbers. Couldn't I have an average? And this is the joy of prep, that we can actually jump back and forth and make our lives a little bit easier for ourselves. That I need to change my data type to a number. I change it to a whole number. We've got no decimals within that. We'll see that Tableau forms a simple histogram, but again, I can, because it's grouped up to fit it on one screen, I can go and look at each of those individual values if I want to. It gives me a little mini histogram on the side. So many little great visual touches. I love it. But this allows me to go and now choose an average because we're dealing with a number rather than a string. Again, words and characters. So what's that actually done? It will show you down the bottom right-hand corner, way too squished. Go and add in another clean step. Makes your life so much easier to go and see what's happening. And we can see that we've now got a column for our date and our cities, and then 1 column each for each of my metrics. So the granularity of data that we've got left is per city and date combination. So London on the 16th, Edinburgh on the 16th will be a new row. And then when we get to the 17th, we'll have new rows for both cities. We're getting each of those 4 measurements about that. That's a data set that makes sense to me. If you want to change the order of those fields, you can just go and grab those and drag those around. It doesn't overly matter. Tableau's just going to absorb that and load it into the left-hand data pane in desktop, however you want to. But if you're outputting as a CSV for somebody else to read, maybe that helps to make it a little bit easier. But ultimately, my data is now clean. It's ready to use. I'm able to go and pick it up. So let's go and create an output. So again, click on that plus, click on the output, and we're now able to go and choose, where do we want to go and push this file to? Is it to a database? Is it publish it up to a Tableau server? Well, I'm going to do what I always do, and that's go and save, not as a hyperfile, so Tableau's own extracts. And if I am going to just use it in Tableau, I will do a hyperfile. It's optimized for that. But I normally save things as a CSV just in case somebody else needs to use the file. And then I can just go and drop this somewhere. So let's go and drop this into my downloads, along with lots of other versions of this. So let's just do student week 2 output. If I could spell, that would also be useful. Click accept. Now nothing's actually happened until I hit the little play button, either on this particular output, because you could have multiple outputs at different levels of aggregation. You can do loads of cool stuff like that. That helps different people solve different problems. Or I can just click the play button at the top. As you'll see, that didn't even take a second to go and produce this data set and write this file, which is now lurking in my outputs, which is nice. So that's ready to go and be used. Now, if I'm not sure whether that data is ready, because in your shoes, you might be newer to all of this, sometimes you want to go and test this out. So one of my favorite little features within Prep is if you right click on the tool, you can go down to preview and desktop. What that's going to do is Tableau is going to write a little hyperfile as a little dummy output to go and show you what that data actually looks like up to that point. So you can go and check whether it's working the way that you want it to. So my Mac is being a little bit slow. Apologies for this. But what Prep's done is it's run the workflow, produced this hyperfile. It's now going to load in Tableau Desktop, which is getting excited. It's jumping around as things on the Mac like to do. And then I should be able to dive into Tableau Desktop and start checking the analysis to see whether it actually works the way that I want it to. I'll skip an update, which I never recommend doing. But we could go and look at our dates, which is a date field. So we can go and dig into all of our dates. And I love that. But dates are also lovely because I could just go and say, I'm only got a week's worth of data. So let's go and look at our individual weekdays. Let's go and compare our two cities because I can kind of know what's going to happen relatively in London. And then let's go and compare our actually precipitation. How much is it going to rain? All right, Edinburgh, it's not a surprise. It's a lot wetter than in London. For anybody who's ever been to Edinburgh, if you haven't got wet through rain, you're very lucky. It's almost weird. Been many times, I've always been rained on. And that's a Brit saying that. So Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday going to be much wetter than London actually throughout the week. It's only Saturdays that are similar. I'm taking a jacket. And I did take a jacket and it did rain heavily. So, this data did help me actually. And we can go and produce our analysis. But ultimately, this is for me, it's testing, it's validating the data set that I've got. Anybody can use this through drag and drop. I've built a data source that other people might not be able to use. They might spend a lot of time manipulating in Excel, which would be really annoying because if somebody goes and adds in another week's worth of data, you're going to go and have to make all of those changes on that spreadsheet again. In our case, we just go and pick up that new file. If it's called the same thing and saved in the same location, we can just go and press run and we've done all the work already. So again, that's going to take less than a second to go and update and then have that second week's worth of data. That's the power of Tableau Prep. For me, this is a very simple Excel flow, but ultimately it's kind of very similar challenges that you're going to have as you start working with data. You're going to have messy string fields. Those words, they seem similar, but just having a trailing space, which you can't even see when you look at a screen, and actually Excel sometimes takes off for you. If you try and put that into Tableau, you're going to get different results. Put it into any tool, apart from Excel, you'll get different results. Having that ability to format dates to then go and play with the days of the week. It's not listed there. Tableau is using its internal calendar to go and work out which day of the week that actually is. It allows us to go and do different bits of analysis than what we would have done otherwise. We can go and make things much easier for our users by putting lots of the harder calculations into what we do here. And I won't go too far with this, but I will just show some things that actually there's some really advanced calculations that we can do. Level of detailed calculations you probably won't come across for a while, but within Tableau Prep, we use a visualized style of calculation. So I could go and look at the average precipitation and say, actually, I want that per city. So I can actually see that Edinburgh's got about 10 millimeters of rain expected across that week, where London's only got 3.14. It's almost pi, that's a bit weird. But you've got that ability to do bits of analysis here that's actually quite complicated, and users wouldn't necessarily be trained up to use Tableau Desktop to that level to be able to go and do that. So you can go and actually empower people to do much more advanced forms of analysis than they would be able to otherwise. We can also do things like ranks, which on this set doesn't make sense, or we break up the distributions to actually go and do more profiling analysis using tile, etc. There is so much within Tableau Prep that actually, if you just start using the basic tool through just clicking the steps and adding those and building that logic, you can save yourself hours, if not days. The team that I ran at Aviva, so those old guys that sat in the corner, admittedly across 3 offices, Sheffield, York, and Norwich. So I had a team of 15 people. I'd say half their work, if not 3/4 of their work, was cleaning up data sets. So taking those SQL outputs or taking those Excel inputs from other teams and going and cleaning those up and doing the same thing every week. Now, I don't know about you, but that would bore me. I'm not going to enjoy my job. I'm probably going to make mistakes because I'm not going to be thinking about stuff in the same way, even though, again, I'd like to think I'm pretty good at this data stuff. That's just going to go and really kill my career. It's going to kill my interest in something and that company. Building a prep flow means we've built that logic once. We can just get that to run. We can get Tableau Prep Conductor to run that for us on a schedule whenever we want to. My team never has to touch that again. That is beautiful. That's a huge time saving. So what do I suddenly do with those 7.5 to 11 people that don't have jobs anymore? They do have jobs, because what I was trying to do at Aviva was get them to go out and work with the business and solve more of those questions in the moment, to go and improve that net promoter score from -33 up to a much higher level by analyzing what customer demand really was there. What do people really want from us as a company, and what weren't we offering and why? Really working with those department heads. So rather than turning up with a PowerPoint deck at a board meeting going, Sue, the life insurance side of the business is not doing well, you're failing on this. And you can imagine Sue's emotional response to that wasn't positive. We can go and work with Sue to actually understand really what's going on within that business unit to go and improve things. That is where there is a human side behind this data. And what Tableau Prep does, even though it's not that beautiful side that's going to go and capture and grab people's attention in the same way that Tableau Desktop is, it absolutely empowers us to go and ask and answer those questions that we just don't have access to otherwise, and go and push our analysis much further. So we make better decisions, we make more of an impact. Ultimately, that's going to open up different doors to you career-wise, whether that's pay or opportunity, or even different jobs. And that's really kind of what's happened in my career. So if we go back to that initial squiggle, lots of that squiggly comes from I've just been really competent in what I've done because I've used data to validate what I've done, where people didn't have that ability and skill set to go and do that. So it was harder for them to go and do those kind of things. It's why most of the C-suite in lots of big companies are accountants and actuaries, because they're the ones who have traditionally been able to use data. The world of data analysis and what Tableau is allowing us to do is changing that story. So it's not just those folks who have to go and do that. So if I just jump back to my deck, there's only a couple of slides to go. You'll be very pleased to know that now you can kind of hopefully see what a flow is. You can pick it up, you can run with it, start to go and produce that. The one thing that I think is a reflection that I had when I wrote the first book was that idea that everybody had the skills to do this, that yes, the barrier to entry was absolutely lowered, but everybody knew how to go about working with data, and they didn't. So my one piece of advice is absolutely get stuck into Tableau Prep. Use it, let it empower you. But I would add one more bit, which is actually with whatever tool set you use, and I've just seen a question coming about Power BI, happy to talk to you about that in just a second, is actually how do you approach data preparation? And I feel like loads of people just jump in and that way they make mistakes within that. I think if you just take a step back and just plan your prep, you can actually go and make a much bigger impact and make sure you're spending your time wisely as well. So I'm just going to quickly go through 4 stages of know your data, working out the desired state, working out those logical transitions that you're going to go through, that you've seen me go through on screen, that are simplified steps within prep, and then you actually dive in to go and build it. So let's use a simple data set just to go and talk this logic through. The first thing is important about getting to know your data. Like I said, that I did that work at Barclays of connecting to all those different database tables, trying to understand if it was relevant, if it was the things that I wanted. Really, lots of people would just sit and look at a table. I think looking at a snapshot of the table, just look at those first few rows, start to understand what's actually within there. In this case, it's from my fake soap company, because we're cleaning data, hence soap. Terrible puns, don't worry. If you buy the book, there's lots worse puns in there. But Chin and Beard Subs company, my fake soap company that I've set up, and people have actually asked for samples from as well. Very weird. But we've got some different branches in London. We're selling some different products. We're measuring our sales across those different months. And this is where we're kind of getting a new month that's added as a new column each time we get that kind of sales number through. The first thing I do is I actually kind of ignore what's on the screen a little bit. And I take a step back and I look at the structure of the data. So I look at two different things. What I class as categorical data, so the descriptive part of the data, the branches, the products, that is describing what product I've sold in which branch. The date is also categorical in its own way because we're selling different things for different dates. But then I also look for where the values are within the data, because they're the things we're analyzing. What is that value? Where are they hidden? And I actually sketch out that. So you'll notice in my sketch, I'm not putting the values in, or I might just do the odd one just to familiarize myself with it, but I'm not writing out the table again. I'm just using this blue and green logic that you'll see in Tableau Desktop. That's kind of language for me that's similar in Power BI. They stole it from Tableau and other tools too. But it's that idea of categorical data versus values. I then try to work out, okay, so if that's the state that it was in, what do I want it to become? So like the example we went through with our weather data, I know that I needed to get one column per metric. Detailing that's useful. In this case, I want to get one column of dates because Tableau works better in that way. And then one column alongside that doesn't just say value, but what are those values? It's actual sales numbers. The branch and the product will stay as an individual column. I might want to go and clean up those values that are in there and start jotting down those ideas. That helps me understand what I might want to do and why. That third step is start to work out, even if I don't know how to do it in the tool. And this is a big one. And I think this is the one that can save a lot of people a lot of time. Work out kind of what those steps that you're going to have to go through clean that data. And again, super quick sketch. I know that I need to go and clean up some values in the branch and the block data. But also I'm going to have to do this pivot to change this date structure to get a column of dates and a column of the values. Knowing of those logical transitions helps. And again, getting a familiarization to some of that is super useful, but you don't have to know how to do this in each tool. Ayush mentioned about pandas earlier. I don't know how to do a pivot off the top of my head in pandas, but I know if I need to change that structure of that data, I could really quickly go and Google to find out how to do that pivot. And that's absolutely why it's kind of save you a lot of time knowing and kind of planning out that process before you just dive in with both feet and kind of make some mistakes as you go. And the final step is actually going and building it. And that's where if you've kind of got techniques that you're not sure about, you can go and ask colleagues or people who do know, or you can go and start doing a little bit of Google searching to find out what that technique might be as to how to go and solve that. And really solving that data set is a simple one in this case, that we're just pivoting the data after we input it, and then we're just going and doing a few cleanup functions to before outputting that data set. That is the one thing I would love you all to do. I say this to every data schooler and they all sit there and nod in week one. It's like, Carl, of course I'm going to plan my prep. It's always what we're going to do. By the end of week 3, they don't. And then they bring me their problems. I'm like, cool, show me your plan. They haven't done it. As soon as they plan, they've worked out what they need to do. Life's simple again. So please plan your prep, but then also just have a go at using Tableau Prep. It really is a tool that's kind of lowered that barrier to entry and made life easier. Absolutely use prepandData.com, which is our newer site that has all of the newer features that are brought out in Tableau Prep. So since 2021, we've been using the site to kind of have all of the newer how-to posts, whereas the prepandData.blogspot.com site, the older one, will have all of the challenges still in the old sites. But this new site has all of those newer features. So if you want to stay up to date, it's a great way to do it. If you don't really know where to start, I'm going to plug my own book. It's exactly why I wrote it. It's for people getting used to Tableau Prep in the first place. The Cute Quokka also just helps. But Prep Up Running is a great way to not just start using Tableau Prep, but also think about the concepts that exist within data preparation. And then all of those things that Simon spoke about, I wrote a book on that too. So not prep related, although there's lots about where data comes from. But actually it's really relevant to what I teach at the data school. So how not just kind of visualizing data and where does data come from and how to structure it, but actually how to go and apply those skills, from going from the individual mark you make on the page to the annotations, to the titles, to the text, to the layout and orientation of all of that. And then how do different departments and organizations want to use it? That's what I wrote about within communicating with data. So really, really applicable to probably the journey that you're all going through at the moment. So yeah, shameless plug, but that's also just part of the fun of writing these things. And that was how I spent lockdown, which was a terrible, terrible way to spend lockdown. sure better than some, much worse than many others. And also having a baby as well, that was also stressful too. So that's why I look like this, normally happy and much younger. Yeah, working with data is brilliant. If you're choosing this as a career, or it's going to be a part of your job, which it is for pretty much everybody these days, having those skills and just building a bit of competency and confidence with this stuff is absolutely the way to go. So you're not seen as this kind of crazily amazing person for just being able to do some of the basic things that I was very lucky that I had. But those skills are absolutely needed in every role that I keep coming across, which is why we're training hundreds of thousands of people to be able to go and use these skills. And that demand is still there just as much now as when I started doing this stuff back in 2008, 2009. It's scary how similar it is today. So you haven't missed the boat. They're brilliant skills to have. The world needs these skills to go and ask and answer those pesky questions. I spoke about poking people with sticks earlier. It's nobody likes being challenged on something, especially when it's supposed to be their area of expertise. But we've absolutely got to be able to do that to each other. So these skills are really essential. So I won't preach any more than that, and I will come back to the question about Power BI over Tableau. But I will say, if there's any questions, please throw them into either the Q&A or the chat, and we can work our way through those. And I will start with the Power BI versus Tableau. And they're basically two different tools. Yes, they visualize data and they create charts, but they're two very different things. Hopefully you've seen as I've gone through this, actually I'll stop sharing this slide now. Hopefully you've seen as I've gone through this, that you'll hear me talking about when working with data, you won't always know what you have. It's very rare that you get given this perfectly curated data set that answers all of your questions that you ever have. It doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. Even though my team produced many of their reports every single week for years, really people were asking different questions of those, or wanted different data points within those reports than what were there. And that's the difference between Tableau and Power BI. Tableau is this tool to go and explore data, not just within prep, but within desktop as well. Go and ask and answer different questions on the fly very quickly. Whereas Power BI is much more of a tool where it's, I know this chart, here's my input, here's the columns, it's in the same place, and there's my chart. That's kind of the stuff my team was doing in Excel and PowerPoint back in 2008, 2009. Really, the world, I would say, has moved on, should have moved on more than that. Whereas people still are resistant and don't have the skills to be able to go and ask and answer questions of the data. Use tools like Tableau, even though it's very accessible. And that's why you've still kind of got this rivalry between Power BI and Tableau. Lots of companies use Microsoft. So the IT teams are, dare I say, a little bit lazy, and they haven't gone out and really tested what the best tool is. They've just gone, oh, it looks like it, I get it as part of the deal with Microsoft. Cool, we'll use Power BI over Tableau. That's really how lots of this stuff happens. It makes me sad. Power BI does have a few cool features that I'd love Tableau to have. And again, I'm poking the developers to get some of those in as soon as we can. But really, Tableau is this data exploration tool. And like I say, that's kind of more of what the world needs than just kind of just sharing more charts. More charts helps. Don't get me wrong, it's better than not having that data. But having the ability to go and push that analysis further, and you learn something, so you ask that next question, for me, that's more important. So that's why I'm still picking Tableau over Power BI every single day of the week. Otherwise, I wouldn't do this job. So there we go. Javier, awesome question. Pros and cons of using Tableau versus Ultrix. So I teach both, and I'm a partner of both softwares. So I have to be really careful what I say here. But I'll say what I say to the Ultrix team and the Tableau Prep team. Tableau Prep did what Ultrix has done for years and lowered the barrier to entry. Apart from, compared to coding against SQL, you know, that's quite challenging. You got to learn SQL or Python originally, or R, start using data. That's tougher than most people. Most people don't have the time to do that. Ultrix was the first tool that we really found that made drag and drop icons like Tableau easy and accessible to go and make this more accessible. Apart from Ultrix, when you download it originally, has 175 tools. Tableau Prep has those 9 steps. Do you want to learn 9 things, or do you want to learn 175 things before you start? I want the 9 things. I'm lazy. I want to go and use the tool and start getting benefit from it. So Prep is easier. Now, the benefit of having 175 things is you can do a lot more. There are things that I can't even comprehend that people have built in Alteryx. One of my former colleagues, Ben Moss, he became an Alteryx ace, so like the Visionaries, but for Alteryx. He built something that took a photo of your face and turned it into Lego blocks, and actually could send the order to Lego to then basically send you a kit to build your portrait of yourself in Lego. He built that in Alteryx. I can't do that in Prep. I don't want to do that in Prep, if I'm honest. I don't know why Ben did, but it's bloody cool. There really is things in Alteryx that there's nothing I say that it can't do. It's very good for automation. It's a bit more of a stable tool because it's been around about 30 odd years now compared to Prep being around before. Trust me, I'm working with the Prep devs to get Prep more stable, and it's pretty much stable these days. I can rely on it to use it in big businesses. But it is that bit harder to get stuck into with Alteryx at first, and not everybody has an infinite amount of time to learn these tools, right? So it's, how do you want to get more people in doing this stuff and asking better questions? I want them to start using Prep. Eventually, if they're doing some really sophisticated stuff, might I nudge them on to an Alteryx or a Python or an R? Yep. But I've got to have the time and budget to go and invest in that. So that's really where those start to get different. And I've just seen a Q&A come in from Harold. How do you compare R and Tableau? Oh, it's two different beasties. I'd actually say the precision in Tableau is better than it is in R, which seems weird that R is this statistical piece of software, so surely it's more precise. Depending on the R packages that you're using, Tableau is just built to go and explore and interact and have somebody work with that data, not just building the charts, but actually viewing them, whether it's on Tableau Server or Tableau Online, or actually on desktop itself or Tableau Public, to actually go and really understand what that data is showing. Where I've had numerous presentations, and the first R presentation I ever had was from a university while I was working at a bank, and they presented 125 black and white scatter plots to us. Myself and my colleague Pete were the only ones out of 8 people who were still awake in the room by the end of the meeting. And I mean that 6 other people fell asleep. So R is a very precise tool. You can do some amazing modeling in it. Just do the outputs in Tableau. It becomes a lot easier. You can put R scripts into Tableau Desktop. You can put R scripts into Prep. So absolutely use the R engine to go and do a lot of that modeling if you've got those capabilities. Alteryx's prediction tools are actually based within R. There are scripts that you can open up within there. But ultimately, yeah, visualize in Tableau. I can't say that loud enough. Ultimately, I called my second book Communicating with Data. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find these messages and share them with others. That ultimately comes down to precision and trust. The only way you're going to get that is interaction and clarity. Tableau really fights you hard if you're trying to do something that isn't best practice. So it's trying to make you communicate that data as clearly as possible. No other tools really do that. They let you work around really simply. And that sounds great when your boss is going, I just want a pink scatter plot. The problem is, you probably don't want a pink scatter plot. If Tableau is trying to show it in a different way, it's probably because it's not the right way to do that. So yeah, that term precision kind of really caught my eye within that. There's probably a much longer debate we can actually have around that anyway. But there we go. I think they're all the questions that have come in. So any others lurking out there? If not, I will give you 9 minutes of your lives back.
Awesome.
Oh, well, I'm sorry you've had issues with the sound. That was just the British accent. I guess there was some other bits early where it wasn't playing ball. So hopefully that's worked. If not, on this session, maybe we've got the recording to the old session, if not Bergen, to link to. I've said many of the similar things. So maybe yeah. I'll get back for a third time to a re-recording of a different audio in that case.
Yeah, apologies for some of the sound issues that a few of you had, but we'll send around the recording, send the one from last summer camp as well, just in case you weren't able to kind of hear a lot of the amazing things Carl talked about. But Carl, thank you so much for just coming back again for this series. I think I always walk away with like something new and something interesting. And so I really just appreciate you taking the time, and we're really grateful.
Cool. No, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, if you have questions off the back of this, I love connecting with people on LinkedIn and answering random questions. Do that. On Twitter, my profile is @DataJediNinja. It's a long story behind that one. Let's not go there. Or my email address is carl.allchin@theinformationlab.co.uk. Feel free to drop me an email if you've got kind of questions that are kind of lurking around. I would much rather answer them and hopefully make you guys feel empowered as to how to use data and confident with what you want to do. And I will also tell you the truth. Hopefully you felt that through the Power BI and R and Ultrix rants I've just gone through. I said there were some good bits about them, not just bad. So I'll always let you know that as well. So yeah, if you've got questions and you're afraid to ask elsewhere, absolutely do that. But you've also got a great lineup of speakers that Bergen's organised for the rest of the week. So don't forget that you can always ask them as well. Don't be afraid to ask those questions.
Yeah, and I will include, when I send the email with the on-demand video, I'll include all of Carl's social channels and email, so you can reach out to him as well. To just end, just wanted to share what's next on the agenda for tomorrow. So if you haven't already, please feel free to get your free Tableau desktop and Tableau Prep license through our students programs. And then tomorrow we're going to jump into really getting a unique and interesting understanding of kind of the interface of Tableau desktop and kind of the tools and functionalities through kind of like an escape room type of game. So I think that'll really, Tableau Prep will set you up, and tomorrow will set you up for that really big hands-on training on day 4. So I will stay on for just a couple more minutes in case anyone has any other questions. But Carl, thank you again so much for joining us. Hope your little one is able to get a nap and get some sleep today. But thank you again.
Cool, no problem at all. I've just seen a question coming around some issues with installing Prep. There's lots of different versions of Prep that are out there. If you're trying to install the latest one, maybe just go back one version. Installing Prep is exactly the same as installing desktop. Should be absolutely no different. You've got Windows versions as well as Mac versions, so just make sure you're getting the right one of those. And it doesn't have to be the same version as Tableau Desktop. So if you've got a newer version of Desktop, you can have a slightly older version of Prep, and that's also fine. So have a go with that. And if you've still got issues, let me know, or raise a support ticket with Tableau, and they'll come back to you and hopefully solve those, because yeah, that should work. Cool.
I see another question that's coming in of the discounted certification, and does it apply for the data analytics certification exam too? Unfortunately, at this time, we're only offering the discount for the Tableau desktop specialist exam, but we are currently working with our certification team to see if we can expand upon that discount to the other exams, because we've seen, especially over these last couple of years, that students are really interested in getting certified and really up-leveling their skills. So at the moment, just Tableau desktop, but in the future, we're hoping to supply that discount for other exams as well.
I will just say for the data analytics cert, normally we get people in the data school who have gone through a month's solid training to take that. So really, if you're using Tableau sporadically, I would probably go with just the specialist exam to begin with and get that. If you have used Tableau really heavily for at least 3 months, then I would look at doing those next level certifications. I wouldn't try and do too much earlier because it's not likely that you would pass, unless you're special, in which case go for it if you're backing yourself. But yeah, just be a little bit careful around that, because that next level exam up's got some sneaky bits within it.
Yeah, and we have a ton of resources that I'm happy to share around too, as well as kind of preparing for those certification exams and kind of taking like practice tests and things like that. So I'll include that with the on-demand recording in case anyone's interested. Yeah, I see someone asking for just more incentives for like the self-learners and non-students. Absolutely. I think it's why I think I welcome so many community members here to this series, because our Tableau community truly just builds some incredible things without even Tableau employees or the company having to ask. So I'll share a lot of the programs that our Tableau community runs, because I think those are some really great starting programs to keep learning Tableau and also just meet like-minded individuals.
So I'll just say a couple of things on that as well. Like the Tableau community, most people who get employed in Tableau or data analyst based jobs are using what they produce on Tableau Public as a portfolio in the same way as an architect or an art student would. And it's amazing how you will be approached, and there's now an option within Tableau Public to say that you're open for work. The big incentive there is you're actually you can shop your skills way better than somebody can with a CV, where, trust me, as an employer who hires hundreds of people every year, CVs mean very little, because you can say that you can do something, but until I can actually see it, where Tableau Public is giving you those options to go and show what you can actually do. So certifications are great, but actually sometimes just seeing your actual output, that is a really strong sell to employers. So if you're out there looking for work, or that's going to happen in the future, then I would absolutely say try and build that portfolio. That's a great incentive in its own right, that Tableau Public is there, it's free. The desktop license is great that you've got the year for desktop and prep through being a student, and we're seeing people use those really, really well. But I think kind of that, for me, that incentive is opening up some really interesting doors in really interesting companies. And if you find that you really want to work in a Tableau space and you're kind of hitting a few brick walls with that, then again, drop me a message and I'll try and introduce you to a few people depending on what level you're at or what you might want to do next as those next steps. Happy to do that. And Ayush, I think that kind of comes down to that fellowship piece. There is loads of free resources out there in the community, whether it's the stuff I'm doing with Prep, or what the Workout Wednesday team are doing, or tips and tricks and all the videos from the conferences, or all the free videos that are on Tableau's website. I didn't take any formal training, and I was at Tableau's conferences presenting what I was doing for years before I took a training session, which I had to become a desktop trainer. I learned from the videos that are on Tableau site that are still there today. They've refreshed them, thankfully, but they are still the same videos. So if you work your way through those videos, there's no expenditure that's actually needed within there apart from your time. And again, if you can build that portfolio, you're going to be in a really strong position to get some really interesting offers and jobs down the way. So ultimately, that's what we're looking for within the data school, but it's not just that. There's some massive employers like Simon's, Jones Lang LaSalle, that you mentioned yesterday. They're operating all over the world. They absolutely look at Tableau public profiles to go and find people and find their next team members, basically. And they pay them quite well too. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah, completely echo what you said, Carl. And I think on the last day on Friday, we'll talk a lot about Tableau Public, because we also recently just added a new button that you can add to your profile that says hire me. And so there are stories that we've had from people who have gotten hired through their Tableau profile, of recruiters reaching out to them and connecting with them through that hire me button. So it is a really great kind of networking and job opportunity of really building that portfolio. And that's what we'll talk about on Friday. Amazing. Well, you guys kept us overtime, so apologies, you get no time back. We took a minute of your time. Well, as I mentioned, Carl, thank you again for jumping on today. I will share the recording. I will share all these resources that we talked about and all the ways to connect with Carl. So thank you all again, and have a great rest of your morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. And we will see you tomorrow for day 3.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Speak soon.